So today we have Annemi Conradi as a presenter. She's a senior lecturer in history of art and the director of the research niche visual narrative and creative outputs VINCO at the Northwest University at the Potchefstroom campus. Her research focuses on cultural heritage and contemporary South African visual culture, and her artistic practice includes performance, installation, and mixed media works. And I think she's going to tell us something about some of the practical aspects that she ran into in this area. Her presentation is titled How to Hang Paintings on Digital Walls, Processes and Challenges of Translating a Physical Art Exhibition into a Virtual Showcase on the Kunstmatrix platform. I'll stop my share now, and then Annemi, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Menno, and thanks everyone for showing up. I hope you'll find the presentation interesting and that it will show you a little bit of what we are doing in history of art and in curatorship as well. I don't come from a digital humanities background or field, but in conversations with Menno, he's assured me that it's okay. And so my presentation is really a talking through of some of the practical solutions I had to come up with when I was asked to take a actual exhibition scheduled for 2020 online because of outbreak of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns. So I will share my presentation. I'll switch off my video. Yeah, so as I said, it's not a presentation about the software program. Rather, it's about curating in a virtual space. So in 2019, I was at the University of Johannesburg at the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture. I was doing a postdoc there at the NRF South African Research Chair in South African Art and Visual Culture, when the chair of this center asked me to put together a group exhibition to coincide with a conference that they were organizing. And the focus of the conference was on visual culture and nationalism. So the theme was disturbing views, visual culture and nationalism. And at this international conference, which would have happened in Johannesburg, it would also coincide with the launch of a book, Troubling Images of Visual Culture and the Politics of Afrikaner Nationalism. So the brief was to put together this exhibition that focused on a certain aspect of Afrikaner nationalism and the way in which artists have dealt with this. So I set off and started my research. I started to develop a concept for an exhibition which I would be able to execute on a budget that I was given, and which I could also fit into the space of the gallery at the chair. So the exhibition was then really conceptualized for a very specific audience. It would be an academic audience, scholars from South Africa and around the world who engaged with issues of nationalism in the 20th century and how this would manifest in in the visual arts and design. For example, public monuments or painting, sculpture, drawing, advertising, propaganda, film. So I had a very specific audience. Now, the opening for this exhibition was planned for Thursday, the 23rd of April, 2020. But then in March of 2020, we went into I'm just trying to move my slide. We went into a lockdown in South Africa because of the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2020 and 2021, a lot of conferences went virtual. The exhibition and conference was first postponed to 2020, and we thought we might be able to have a live event. And it then became clear that this would not be possible, and it was decided to have the whole conference and the exhibition online and virtually. So I was then tasked to find a way of moving this exhibition, which I planned, to an online platform. So by this stage, I had finalized my artists and the artworks. Some of the works were in the University of Johannesburg art collection, and I'd organized couriers, insurance. I had organized, I had my toolbox ready for, with hardware for hanging artworks. I had a plan of the gallery floor, where individual works would be installed, how many sculpture blocks I needed. We'd organized and planned for the opening event, for catering. So all of these really practical things have been planned. Then I'd also selected artworks which I could install in this space, including a lot of sculpture. So here on the right-hand side is an example of a porcelain work by an artist named Gretchen Crotz. She makes plates, and in this case, a teapot with Jan van Riebeck's head on it. So I had selected works, assuming that, or thinking that I would be able to install this in a real space. So I really did not plan an exhibition for a virtual space. I wanted to continue with the same theme and with the same artworks, because I felt I'd made a commitment to the artists. They were happy to continue with the exhibition and exhibit online. So I really felt we had an agreement and they had made a commitment. So I wanted to find a way of showing their work. So just to tell you a little bit about the theme, I thought about exhibitions that had happened on the theme. So I did my research to see what curators and gallerists have done around the theme of Afrikaner nationalism. I know that there were publications in the field of history of art and visual studies. And I thought that I would like to address the theme of gender. So I had a very small gallery space to work with. So I really had to narrow down my topic. And I looked at some of the archetypes and some of the standard figures which emerge again and again in nationalist media, or in the art and the popular culture of the 20th century, in particular of the white Afrikaans media. And these are figures like the pioneer farmer, or the good wholesome young maiden, the volksdoentjie, or the mother of the nation who is a good wife and a martyr. So all of these figures, and I wanted to look how contemporary artists and a new generation of young artists engaged with these figures and the legacy of Afrikaner nationalism. So I had a conversation with a colleague of mine at UJ at the time, Dineke van der Walt, who is the curator for the National Arts Festival, or the National Kleinkunstkura Arts Festival in Oudtshoorn. And she had a similar experience when she'd organized for several exhibitions and to show at the Kleinkunstkura National Arts Festival in, I think it's March or April of 2020. And in her case, the artworks had already been loaded into the trucks and were on their way to Oudtshoorn when the national lockdown and the state of emergency was announced, and the arts festival had to be cancelled. So she used a platform called Kunstmatrix, and she had a very successful online arts festival. So I contacted Dineke, and we had conversations about using this platform, and she gave me some tutorials. We had Zoom meetings, and we worked through some of the functions of the program. So I decided to work on this program. So Kunstmatrix is a platform which provides digital tools and software solutions and products for artists and gallerists, collectors, museums, curators, also auction houses and art fairs in the art world. And these products and tools help you to present your artworks, organize it, to sell artworks online. You can create exhibitions, you can set up art fairs, which is a newer tool. And it really addresses the needs and the demands of arts industry, which has been transforming really fast in the past couple of decades. So it was founded in 2007 by Christoph Lauterbach and Hartwig Bentel, and they were joined by Dr. Christian Hildebrandt in 2008. And Kunstmatrix was, as they write on their website, was the first to offer self-curated exhibitions in 2009, and then also trial hanging and exhibition as a preview apps where you can experiment relatively risk-free in a virtual space when you want to plan the layout of an exhibition. So what you will usually do, and I see that Amogelang Mohajane is amongst the participants, and she'll be able to testify as a curator and a collections manager, that it's a very time-consuming process and quite hard work physically sometimes to do your layout. So you can plan on paper with the most precise of measurements, but when artworks arrive in a space, you often make adjustments. You have to physically move things around. So in the spaces I'll show you, you can do it behind your desk with moving your mouse. So it's a lot easier. So what I want to do is just talk you through how I created this exhibition. Sorry, I'm now and again having, there we go, okay. Yeah, so just to contextualize, the technology that, or the technologies of creating virtual exhibitions and having or enabling audiences and virtual tours in galleries and museums is not new, but it certainly boomed with the outbreak of COVID, when a lot of museums and art galleries had to temporarily close their doors because of lockdowns and because of health risks and fears for infection, and so it was something which one could do and access. So if you wanted to take a tour of a gallery or a museum in another country or city, and you could do so through their website. But as you also saw with the development of Kunstmatrix, it was already running for several years before 2020. But with the outbreak of the pandemic, a lot of curators and artists had to look for alternative ways of showcasing their artworks, showcasing their collections, and giving the public access. And especially with lockdowns, it was something that a lot of people really longed for, to be able to go and see an exhibition and have the experience of engaging with art and culture when they weren't able to do so physically. So the digitization of exhibitions and collections was then one way of doing so. So I will talk you through the way in which I set up this exhibition. I'll look at some of the challenges with installing works, and then we'll also do a tour in the actual exhibition. So you would start off in creating an exhibition by really just setting up all your information. And this is the information which you will usually, you also have to create this for an actual exhibition. So all the information which you would have to create for your marketing, for your cataloging of the works, for your labels, all of these things you have to enter into the program. And I've seen that there are some users online who complain about how long this takes. But then I felt that the program also saves you time in other instances. So you first have to create your list or your catalog of artworks with all of the necessary information before you can start building your exhibition in a selected space. So here's an example of my list of artworks. You enter all your information, and like the title, the date it was created, the size, which is important because it scales the work according to the size you provide when you place the works inside the space you select. So what I had to do was ask all the artists to provide me with high resolution images of their works. And you are really dependent on the artists, or if you work with other galleries or collectors, to provide you with really good images. In the case of the artworks in the University of Johannesburg collection, we really had a challenge because if you remember, we weren't allowed to go to our places of work or to our offices. Luckily, by beginning of 2021, the curators at the University of Johannesburg Art Gallery were kind enough to go into the office, find the works in their storerooms, and have it photographed. And it was a bit of a challenge because the gallery itself wasn't used to doing virtual exhibitions, so that its collection wasn't catalogued with high resolution photographs. So it's something which this shift to the digital has also highlighted, that in order to make this shift, we have to document the holdings of collections in museums and galleries, so that you can easily create a virtual archive or a virtual exhibition. So I spent a lot of time in communication with artists, asking for images and getting a correct format from them. It was the sculptural works really presented a challenge, which I'll speak about now. So what the platform also allows you to do is to frame the work. So frame in inverted commas. So you can choose a color frame and the thickness of the frame. You can also create a border around an image of a specified width and height, and then also color. You can also indicate the thickness of the work. So if your work is absolutely flat, it will sit on the virtual wall as if it's a sticker, which doesn't give you the sense of a real object with weight and depth. So I chose to give the artworks a little bit of depth in order to make it appear like an object, like a painting, and not a sticker on the wall. So the platform also allows you to hang multimedia work such as video, and for this you have to upload your video files. Okay, it also has a function to create a catalog, which is really handy. So all the information you enter is at the click of a button is turned into a catalog where you've got all the important information about the artwork as well as the price. So you can also, as I did, you can also indicate if works are for sale. Now, after you've entered all the information, you have the exciting opportunity to pick a space. And I was really excited about this because unlike the real space where I would have had the exhibition, I could now experiment with different spaces, different architectural styles, and I had a lot more space, which is always great. So I could also increase the number of works that I exhibited, and the sizes of works became much less of a challenge, or so I thought. But I'll speak to that point again. So I decided to pick a space which appears more real, which has a ceiling and a floor and has windows, because I found the spaces which you see here in the bottom, which are just these walls, I found it really almost disorienting when you work in them. So I experimented with them. I put art on the walls, and it felt like you were lost in space, which at a time where a lot of people were working from home and constantly on computers and already as a feeling disconnected from the world, I didn't want that sort of feeling in the exhibition that I did. So here's just a demonstration of how you would quote unquote hang your artworks. So once you have selected your space and you have or have not decided on wall colors, so you can also for free paint your walls, whereas in a gallery it could cost you several thousand of rand to paint a wall or the whole gallery. So it's a click and drag process where you select your work and you drag it to these placeholders on the walls. You can also move the placeholders around, but each space that you select has a specific number of artworks or placeholders. So if your exhibition or the number of works is too big for the space you select, you have to choose a new space and start from the beginning. So when you get to learn when you are getting the hang of the program, as I did, you can really spend a lot of time in figuring things out. So it at times was quite frustrating, but yeah, after a while I got the hang of things. But in a way, it mimics the trial and error process of hanging an exhibition, where you have to sometimes make other plans, or you have to move things around. You can also scale works to fit better in the space. So if you see here in the top image, the artwork that is moved onto the wall is quite small, and then once it's placed on the wall is really big. So depending on the measurements you provide the program, it will scale the work. Something I found with some of the artworks that were smaller was that it became dwarfed in the space, which meant that the artworks wouldn't really come to be shown off in the best light. So I contacted the artists and asked them whether I could enlarge the size, whether I could up the measurements so that their work might appear bigger. Everyone I asked seemed fine with that, and they said that was okay. So when we go into the actual exhibition, some of the works are much larger than they would have been. I also at every as a step consulted with the artists about the color of frames for their works, and then especially also about the way that I work with the sculptures. Something which is lost in a virtual exhibition are the textures of artworks and the intimacy of viewing. So unlike a real museum or gallery, we can walk right up to a work and really see all the textures, all the details, and also in graphic works where you've got text, you can you have much easier access and a much closer, intimate experience with the artworks, whereas here it's not possible. So for the graphic works, such as the cartoons and pages from graphic novels, I enlarged those quite a bit so that viewers could actually read the text. Here's a screenshot then of the exhibition, and you can see the room that I chose. It has windows. It doesn't have a door, which was quite freaky. So you move around the space and there's no door. Something which is also interesting is that you also have to treat wall text like an image. So you have to create an image with your wall text that is then saved as an artwork, and you hang that on the wall as you would with the artworks. So my layout for the exhibition was thematic. I had chosen works that spoke to specific themes, such as nationalist icons like as I said, the pioneer farmer or the mother of the nation. And then there were works that spoke to the psychological and the physical wounding of nationalism and patriarchy and also fascism. Then moving into another room, there were artworks that addressed images of the family, of raising a new generation of members of a nation, mothering. Then there were also artworks that spoke to father and son relationships, but then also LGBTQI plus individuals who find themselves within a culture that is historically quite conservative, that has religious and cultural prohibitions, and yeah, which traditionally excluded such individuals. So I worked around these themes. So yeah, it's just to give you a bit of an idea about how a curator might approach a layout. What the platform allows you to do is provide quite a lot of information for viewers. So when someone walks around the space, they can click on artworks and access all the information like the artist's statement or their bio, a price of a work, the medium, what how it was created, the title. For example, here Octavia wrote a poem about one of her artworks, and we had the poem on the website. And then here's an example of a sculptural work where the artist he provided a statement and a bio about his approach to his art making. A big challenge was the installation and the showcasing of sculpture. There is a function in the program to upload and install sculptural works where you upload a minimum of 4 photographs of the sculpture from the same height and from different angles. And these are then merged to form an object that when you sort of move around it in the space appears as though it is like a round object with volume. I didn't find this very satisfactory. It took me a load of time to get this as right as I could. It was also an extremely time-consuming process, and I also think frustrating for the artists to take photographs of their work from all these different angles and to send it to me. So it was a very time-consuming to and fro. And then in the end, when I got this right, I saw that the objects float on the sculpture blocks. So you have the option in different rooms of selecting a sculpture block and install your sculpture or your object on that. But then, as you can see here, they float on these blocks. It doesn't sit, it doesn't have a shadow. So again, it created it amplified the feeling of disembodiment. When you click on the sculpture, you would get a detailed image, which is very nice, but then still I didn't like that hovering, floating object. So what I thought I could do, and this I checked with the individual artists, was to take a photograph of the object and exhibit it like a picture of the sculpture. All the artists agreed so that it looked much better than this floating, hovering, almost like a UFO sculpture. So here's an example of a sculpture by Sir Richard Stradom. He works in ceramics, and he sent me photographs of his ceramic works. We then removed the background and his works. I selected a black background. I enlarged it quite a lot, and then I also I entered the measurements and also the depth to make it appear as if it is mounted or block mounted, so that the artwork on the wall has depth to also give that sense of an object. Here are other examples. Renee Bortma works in porcelain, and she created these plates that are crocheted and embroidered. We treated it in the same way. With hers, a white background worked better, and you see I also entered measurements to have it appear as if it's block mounted. Here's a sculpture by Cobus Haupt in bronze, and for this we just removed the background of this sculpture, and because of the shadows in his photograph, it it sort of appears as though it's hanging against the wall. Here's another, it's a sculpture by Querbus, which is a bronze mask. And this I then also exhibited as a photograph of a sculpture. Okay, so I want to do a quick tour of the gallery before I look at some of the advantages and disadvantages. So here we're in the program. Which allows you space for your title, a brief exhibition statement, and you can take a guided, or you can just walk around the exhibition on your own. So we enter the exhibition. Is a wall with the title, sorry, and just to give you a sense of the how I've scaled works, if these are graphic works which are quite small, sort of A5, A4 works, and I've enlarged them quite a lot, because when I put the works on this wall in their original sizes, they were really dwarfed. They looked really tiny, and I think a part of that is because of the height of the ceiling, which is quite it just seemed as though all the works were dwarfed. I have a wall with all the artists' names, and then you can zoom into individual works, and then if you want more information, so this is from a graphic novel by Octavia Ruet, In Heaven, in the Himmel, and you can find all the information here. So this is the room where I put together works which address the sort of gender icons, father figures. Over here is a theme having to do with psychological and physical wounding. Anton Kahnemer, a artist who's worked in cartooning and graphic novels. And then here are works by Richard Strydom. Let me just get to that, sorry. Excuse my driving here. Okay. And then into the other rooms, here are themes of the family, parental relationships. Here are several works by young men depicting themselves and their fathers. Pukbota and his son. And then this work, you can really see how important the quality of the photograph is. So this is a print which is embossed, and you can actually see the texture of the paper and the embossing on this artwork. Now, this work by Pierre Fauché is a rope sculpture that is hung on the wall, and was supposed to hang from the ceiling, sorry. And it was impossible to install. So we also exhibit it as a photograph of the artwork. Here are some graphic works of a mum enjoying her time in the sun, anything but the respectable mother of the nation. We can return to this. Manu, I see I have a few minutes left. I'm just quickly going to look at the advantages and disadvantages. One disadvantage is for some people it's the expense. So you pay a monthly fee depending on how many artworks you want to hang. I've looked at some of the disadvantages, such as the challenges with the sculptural works. Sometimes you feel that artworks are not done justice. And then there are such a lot of these exhibitions available online that even though it's available from anywhere at any time, the offering is enormous. But then some of the advantages really include the ease of the software. I feel if I could figure out how or learn how to use this from the tutorials and Denika's advice, then a lot of people can. It saves cost. All these important things that you then do online. You have freedom in determining the size of the space, the wall colors, the frames. And then I think a big advantage is how these the types of exhibitions have democratized access. So I remember in COVID and lockdown, I was sitting in my flat in Potchefstroom, and I could attend exhibition openings and walkabouts from all over the country, and that was really it really meant a lot to me at that time. So according to Bodini and Santos, the access to exhibitions, collections, and archives have been widely democratized and facilitated. I also feel it empowers artists and independent curators who are even less dependent now on gallerists, curators, and dealers to show their work to the public. So it empowers artists and independent curators who can afford the subscription fees, access high-speed internet and devices needed to create exhibitions. And then this year, I set this as an assignment for my honors student in curatorial practice. And these are examples of the exhibitions which they created. And it was relatively cost effective. They could experiment, at will. And it was also suitable for distance learning because we had students in other towns and cities who couldn't do the gallery internships on campus. So I'll end it there. Menno, I'll hand over to you. I don't know if there are questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annemi. There are some questions, or at least there's one question. Tanya, I'm not sure if you want to ask the question yourself, or do you want me to read it aloud?
Oh, no, sure. I'm happy to ask it. Thanks, Annemi, for an interesting talk. I think it must be very daunting at first to try and do art digitally. I can imagine, just to get that out there in a digital space. So one thing that occurred to me, so I'm not doing anything with art, but I'm interested in art. And you said that for especially the comic pages, you would resize them so people could actually read them. And that's when I remembered that I think the NVU Gallery at some stage did some exhibitions, that they put some exhibitions online as well. And there was this functionality of just zooming into the artworks that were being exhibited. So I was just wondering, you resizing them, I mean, was that necessary, or did you mainly do it because you felt otherwise the exhibition didn't look as you wanted it to? Because I would expect, one of the advantages of using a digital environment like this is that there should be a Zoom facility available that people can just zoom into the high quality artworks at least.
You're absolutely right. It does have a zoom in functionality, but I found that even if you zoomed in, it was still quite small. I also wanted the exhibition to look balanced. So if the works were really tiny on the wall, the composition of the exhibition as an aesthetic thing would be off. I think so. I know that the NWU gallery uses a different process altogether to create their online exhibitions. So you hang the exhibition, and someone comes and films the exhibition with a virtual reality, a camera. So you have a very it's a much more real translation of that environment. So yeah, you can zoom in, but then still I felt you couldn't really access the work, the text that well. So it was a sort of a decision I had to make.
Yep, that makes sense, definitely. Thanks.
I'm not sure if there are any other questions. I mean, I've got a few questions. Sorry, Somebody
I
else?
just see that Ria has a question. Is it open source? They have a free option, but then you can only have an exhibition with 10 works. So if you want to put up an exhibition of more than 10 works, then you have to start buying a monthly subscription.
Okay, great. So I had a few questions. You kind of hinted on that as well. So the problem with the sculptures, I think that's an interesting one. And you mentioned a few other things that are essentially in the same space. So if you make this a virtual kind of digital exhibition, you lose certain properties of the piece, right? So I think with sculptures, that's easiest to see because you miss the 3D aspects, but you also miss textures.
Yeah.
So how do you, and I think that's a large, well, I'm not sure if it's a large part, but that's definitely part of a piece of art. So how do you get that across? I mean, seeing something, so essentially taking a digital picture is like a first derivative of this real piece of art, and you can describe it in text, and then that's like a second derivative or something like that. How do you still get across the whole aspect of the artwork in a digital space? And I think that is more important for something like a sculpture that has an inherent 3D aspect versus a painting, which is more like generalizing a little bit, of course.
So one thing that I must say, I think my solution was it also came after spending days and days trying to get these objects positioned on sculpture blocks and feeling like, I'm failing at this. I'm not doing justice to the artworks. I don't have the skills. So it's also my skill set that is really lacking in that sense. But when I look at some of the exhibitions on Kunstmatrix and their sample exhibitions, like the ones I showed you, I do feel that this is a software problem, which still needs refining. And I know that they're constantly working on the program. I think a better option is the Matterport approach, which is what the Northwest University Gallery does, and other spaces as well, where you get someone in to film a real exhibition, but then you don't have, it's not first and foremost a virtual exhibition. So when they film the works in the gallery and translates it into a virtual exhibition, you can really get a sense of the three-dimensionality and the scale of the object, and you can sort of walk around it. But I think I feel it is a software issue that has to be refined. And then also on the user side, I didn't have the tools and the know-how to get this right. I also feel as though the video works aren't, as they installed on the wall, isn't quite satisfactory. But then on the other hand, you are comparing it to an in-person experience, which is a very high standard.
Yeah. So I understand. I was actually wondering when you were showing the kind of fly through. It's more a fly through than a walk through, I think. So what is it that makes me feel like this is still I mean, look, it is a virtual thing, but what exactly is different from an in-person, like a real I don't know what to call that, exhibition? So one of the things that I saw is you're alone there in the room, so there are no other people walking around. The room is actually quite empty, so there are no benches or something. It's really, the walls are there and it's the space. But what is it? Is that really just it? How do people perceive a virtual exhibition versus a real physical exhibition? What is still missing?
So before I forget, I just want to answer the open access question. I think I misunderstood the question. You can access the exhibitions for free. So if you go, yeah, they have sample exhibitions on the website. And then, for example, the exhibition I did for the Saatchi chair, they've had other exhibitions and you can access the exhibitions for free. So just that before I forget. You're absolutely right, Menno. It's very, and I think that sense of being just in space and the disembodiment is because the spaces are so stark. Even if there's like a bench or two, you aren't in the space with other people. You don't hear the sounds of being inside a gallery, or you don't have the sense of being in a space. So what is missing, I think, is that sense of being in a space that is humane in terms of the sound and sense and sight, and the textures and the sort of feeling of that. I know that there are other platforms which are more I don't want to use the word humane, but which isn't as alienating. I see that Tanya has a hand up.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that. Maybe we're approaching it in the wrong way if we're trying to make it emulate the real experience. Maybe we really have to look at it as something that is completely different, and that will never be the experience you have if you go to a gallery with other people. But it's a completely different way of experiencing art. And maybe if we view it in that way, we're not trying to achieve that standard. We're never going to get to the real experience virtually. I mean, even with virtual reality, what's it called? Virtual reality spectacles or something, we're still not going to get the real feeling because it's always going to feel alien. So maybe we have to approach it differently and sort of see more what is the potential that is there that is actually different to the real exhibition. And one thing you mentioned, I think, is the fact that you can paint all the walls bright pink if you want, and if it's no good, then you just paint it over and there's no cost involved, no anything. You can just go ahead and experiment a lot more. So maybe that's a nice way of approaching it and just seeing it as a new way of exhibiting rather than emulating the old way, but then on a computer.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I think it's a bit like playing a game where you are a Formula One driver and actually driving. You can have a very cool seat and the sound and everything, but it's not, even if you have all those things, it's not the same. And I think it really has potential as a teaching tool, which I experimented with this year, and the students enjoyed it. As part of their assignment, they had to conceptualize the exhibition, do all the writing, select the works, hang the exhibition. They had to do a guided tour as part of their assessment component. So they got experience in so many facets of what you do in the job, and they could do it from home if they had Wi-Fi access, which I think was really great. There is now research coming out on the experience of these exhibitions, which I think a lot of it is by scholars who are writing up work they did in 2020 and 2021 with COVID. I think a last question for me that I want to ask the audience is whether you made use of things like this during COVID to almost get out of your house in a virtual sense and go into public spaces. And it doesn't necessarily have to be museums or galleries.
I did it once or twice with the NVU gallery, but for the rest, I think, to be honest, things like films and series were more of a mode of escaping home rather than anything else.
Yeah, I can relate to the films and series as well. I just saw a comment from Lindell about opportunity for artists. Absolutely, we saw that with Facebook, websites, Instagram, and I think that this really helped. It really empowers artists and independent curators, and to get their work out there in a much more inexpensive way, and you can get a global audience. Amol?
Hello. This is well done. This is amazing. It's cool and interesting. I know I've been in some of your classes. I know I've bunked some. But these kind of platforms, because I'm just gonna go back to Menno's kind of comment or question. It's not like also how what I think it's Tanya when she was responding that we don't necessarily have to look at, we have to take these platforms as a different way of experiencing certain things that happen. And I mean, like Annemi's already alluded to, the fact that these platforms were used as convenient ways of allowing people to continue with the kind of normal activities that they were used to, but taking away the kind of like human experience of being in an actual museum or a gallery. These are also used, because what I've also noticed is that we used the Metaport technology for the Northwest University Gallery. And that is another different kind of platform where, in a sense, it involves the physical work being in the actual space and then getting a technician to actually come and render the physical space. And that also, it's beneficial in a sense that it allows you to experience the exhibition physically and also virtually. And another one of how real estate agents use these kind of platforms is to also give you like a feel of, if you were a new home buyer, you get to do it at your own pace and at your own time. And what's also interesting about these is that you can go back if you didn't have enough time to go and view these spaces, even if it's a year or 2 years back. It's nice that it actually allows you to go back, and these also allow for research purposes, because I'm going to be using some of these as examples in writing my master's paper and looking at online exhibitions and different modalities that they've been that everybody has been using to showcase exhibitions and stuff like that. So that's how I've looked at these platforms and how we utilize them.
Thanks, Amol. Menno, I don't know. I think we're out of time. I don't know if there's.
But I warned you beforehand, right? So this is it's easy to take up a little bit more time, but I think we should kind of stop here. Just one quick comment in the beginning. You said, you're not really doing digital humanities, but now, I mean, talking about the digital aspects and how people perceive them and how you deal with this, I think that is really at the core of digital humanities. So I think you might want to kind of rethink your activity in the space of digital humanity.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but thank you so much for a really nice presentation. I really enjoyed this. And I think it's nice to see a little bit more on the background of setting up such an exhibition instead of participating or just watching one. So I thought it was really nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Something I remember now is when my subscription expires, then I lose access to this exhibition. So, which is a bit sad. If that is one thing that I think would be nice, is to have that as an archive and not just the catalog. So in a way, your exhibition in the end, it comes down. It goes back to your drive folder storage.
Yeah, no, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yep, thanks.
And thanks for the question.